This is the Committee of the Whole. We're in City Hall Council Chambers, 389 Spruce Street. Today is Tuesday, August 27th. It's a little bit after 7 p.m. This meeting will be broadcast live via YouTube at City of Morgantown YouTube. Note, Committee of the Whole meetings of Morgantown City Council are intended to provide an opportunity for council to receive information, ask questions, identify policy options in an informal setting. No official action is taken at these meetings. At this Committee of the Whole meeting, the following matters are scheduled. We're starting off with presentations, and the first presentation is the Fairmont Morgantown Housing Authority Annual Report with the Executive Director, Crystal Caruso.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of Council. My name is Crystal Caruso. I'm the Executive Director of the Fairmont Morgantown Housing Authority, and I'm here tonight to give our annual report to you. I want to also mention I have two commissioners with me this evening, Commissioner Brian McAllister and our new Commissioner, Rachel Cohen. So they're here with me to provide support. And I want to send out a special thanks to them, all they do to support our programs and make sure that our policies and operations are all in order. Over the past several weeks, we've heard a lot about the struggles and challenges around affordable housing in Morgantown, and there's no doubt that housing is hard. I am so pleased to know that this council approved the creation of an affordable housing study where policies and solutions can be gathered and recommendations can be given. And Kim, I'd like to request to be involved in those discussions, and I look forward to whatever extent you see acceptable, and I look forward to very much to the process. I recently read through a rough draft of a tri-state housing study that will be released later on this year, and it noted the following challenges that face housing in West Virginia. Lack of affordable housing, increase in construction and development costs, which is estimated to be 20% increase from 2023, a lack of decent housing stock, lack of housing rehabilitation programs, lack of accessible housing, and lack of programming around the opioid epidemic or recovery housing. These are all things that we are seeing right here in our community. In fact, these are the exact same things that were listed in Morgantown's town hall meeting that we held in March of this year. But tonight, I want to talk to you about the things that the Fairmont Morgantown Housing Authority is doing to address the housing challenges in the region. And remember that our housing authority is a regional housing authority, so we're covering 4 counties, Mon, Marion, Preston, Taylor, as well as the 2 cities, Fairmont and Morgantown. Our housing authority is rated as a high HUD performer in our federal programs, and we're administering 1,300 housing vouchers to the region. This accounts for approximately $787,057 per month in housing rental assistance. Those are subsidies that are paid to participating landlords in our area. Our average housing assistance payment per person is $653 per month. The Housing Authority provides regular housing choice vouchers. Those are called, I always call them the vanilla. They're just regular housing choice vouchers. But we also participate in special purpose vouchers. We talked a little bit about that last year. So those are vouchers that are set aside for a special population. Our Housing Authority does special purpose vouchers for veterans, emergency housing, which is folks that are at risk of being homeless or are homeless. We do the Fostering Youth to Independence program, as well as a non-elderly disabled program. It's important to note that as of today, 60% of all of our vouchers are spent in Mon County. So think about that. 4 counties, but 60% of those are spent here in Mon County. The opportunity to get new vouchers is pretty slim. Right now, it usually only comes through a competitive process and for a special purpose. So our housing authority is always watching for those to come open so that we'll have a chance to be awarded. When the emergency housing vouchers were awarded, we were one of only 3 housing authorities in the state that received those vouchers. It's also important for you to know that we do hold a federal contract with the government to provide the housing programs. We do not have a lot of leeway in some of the program requirements. Some of them are statutory or regulatory. So there's some things that we just cannot change. However, Where there is leeway given, the Housing Authority has made the following program enhancements to help make our housing opportunities better for our community. And I thought it would be important to kind of share those with you tonight. The Housing Authority raised its payment standards to 110% of the fair market value. This is in order to keep our rental payments competitive because we're in a university town, and we also have a very robust workforce rental market. HUD's maximum without a waiver is 110%, so we're at HUD's maximum rental payment standard. So I want to give you an example. A 2-bedroom unit, our payment standard is $1,186. So that's one thing. We also, from the months of February to June, we had what we call mass orientations. So we invited 3 times the number of people that we usually invite to orientation so that many people would have an opportunity to get a voucher. We currently have 200 vouchers that HUD calls on the street. That means they're searching. They've gone through the process, they've been given a voucher, and they're out on the street trying to find an acceptable unit. So right now we have 200 of those on the street today. We also created a pool. We have approximately 151 families who are in the pool, and they will be the next group of vouchers that go through. And in addition to those 200, plus the 151, we have 515 people on our waiting list. From February to May, our Housing Authority allowed for an automatic 120-day voucher, which means they didn't have to keep requesting extensions. We automatically gave them the maximum amount that HUD will allow. So that gave them a total of 4 months to get their voucher and to find a unit. The Housing Authority and HUD in general have realized that special services, supportive services, are crucial to giving special purpose voucher holders the best chances for success. And that's for housing stability. The Housing Authority has partnered with local social service providers for case management services to help in all efforts to keep tenancy successful. And I know, Mr. Quickie, you'll remember that we talked about that last year, and Brian Butcher as well, is how it takes like this multi-approach to kind of making sure that all needs are met. So we're trying to do that. We also have some special funding that comes with those special purpose vouchers that the Housing Authority can use for things like security deposits, bus passes, utility hookups, or other things that could create a barrier for someone to get into housing. And those are only for the special purpose vouchers. The Housing Authority also hosts and participates in a monthly case conferencing meeting with approximately 9 other social service providers in the area, and we review and discuss specific cases of the city's identified unhoused population. In these meetings, we review each case, each individual case in detail, and we talk about updates, we talk about next steps, and we talk about strategies to get the unhoused person into a safe environment. These meetings include a dedicated group of street outreach workers from the Coalition on Homelessness, West Virginia Medicine, the City Police Outreach Worker, Health Rate, Bartlett House, West Virginia Peers, Valley Health, and others. And we all work together. The list is long. The list is very long. But every month we see successes where people have been matched to successful housing programs, and then they move off the list. So I wanted to be sure to share that with you. We also employ a housing navigator that works. And I always say the housing navigator was the missing piece in our programming. I did have a chance at one point to talk to HUD's Assistant Deputy Secretary and ask him, this position is funded privately. It's not a HUD-funded program, but it really should be because it's a missing piece. But this navigator actually matches folks who are looking for housing with property owners or landlords who have housing to offer. So it's that perfect kind of matchmaker. I want to kind of give you some numbers. She also provides housing stability services, so information referral, if there's things that they need, she can kind of link those up. In our first year, she assisted 214 people to get into a housing unit. And to date, in 2024, she's connected 250 people. Now, and then we also work with a barrage of collaborations between community agencies, and she's recorded 67 successful transitions with those organizations as well. I'm often asked why we don't have public housing in Morgantown. I really wish we would, but just to remind you, HUD's not doing public housing anymore. I look at some point in the future, maybe they will, but right now they are not. The trend for public housing is tax credits. And the development of tax credits. The Housing Authority has partnered with tax credit developers to provide what's called project-based vouchers, another special kind of voucher that ensures that those vouchers will stay in those units, and those units in those developments will remain affordable. However, I want to add that we have often learned that the criteria for occupancy in a tax credit project is difficult or stringent. So that meaning they might have kind of restrictions on what your credit score can be, kind of restrictions on your background check. So while it does provide accessible, new, affordable housing, there may be some individuals that might not qualify for apartments based on their income or their occupancy criteria. However, this year, the Housing Authority has provided technical assistance and letters of support for other housing development applications in Morgantown through the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh. So we need to continue to look for other developers outside of the tax credit world. If and when someday public housing comes back, we'll be looking to come to Morgantown. Fairmont Housing Authority's Fair Housing Grant ended in May of '24. You all may recall we sent out summaries of our town hall meeting, and that list that I mentioned earlier matched directly up with the list that our community identified as needs in Morgantown. And while we made big strides with the Fair Housing Outreach Program, we are at the mercy of the Office of Fair Housing for funding, and their funding cycles don't always overlap. So we do not have a program this year. We'll continue to look for the grant funds to be released. That grant ran $125,000, and it funded us for a year and provided outreach and education to our service area. It's important for you all to know that we were the only housing authority in the Eastern region, and we were the only agency in West Virginia that was funded last year. So we're hopeful that at some level, those grants will become congruent so that we can continue to operate the program consistently. Fairmont Morgantown Housing Authority is one of the only housing authorities that has a home ownership center. We continue to remain strong there. This year we created a hybrid education course where folks could come in person or attend virtually. We also brought in a foreclosure counselor who's addressing folks that might be experiencing issues with delinquency and mortgage foreclosure. It's also important for you all to know that those programs aren't 100% funded by HUD, so we have to often fundraise and ask for community partners to help us to keep those in operation. We also are working with employers like the City of Morgantown and WVU for employer-based down payment assistance programs for families that want to buy new homes. So I want to talk a little bit about our future plans. I don't know if that says 4. Does that mean I have 4 minutes left?
No, just ignore that.
Okay. So future plans, the Housing Authority would like to work with developers to create more affordable housing. We have some vacant property in the city that can be developed, but we're going to need your help. We would like to work with the city to complete a master plan to develop some of those properties. Regionally, so remember that we're a regional housing authority, our housing authority is working with a local nonprofit organization and a developer to create a scholar house project, which will be located on Fairmont State University's property. A scholar house is a creation of housing with a daycare component, and it houses single parents who are full-time students that are enrolled in some kind of educational program. Historically, these programs have a 96% success rate, and we believe it's a true end to the cycle of poverty. So we're hopeful that that project will take off in 25, 26, and we can duplicate it in other university cities. The Housing Authority will be meeting with the city's land reuse agency to further our conversations about partnerships and collaborations. I want to tell you how I feel that we all can be involved in the future of affordable housing. What we can do right now to help. I think you all should be applauded for the great move that you've made to approve the affordable housing study, and I'm really hopeful that we can produce some workable solutions. Kim, I got a list for you, so I'm all ready to get started whenever you're ready. But I did want to share with you that I did receive a notice last week from HUD's Deputy Assistant Secretary. HUD polled 800 housing authorities across the country. Of the 800 housing authorities that were polled, 400 of them are expected or predicted to experience a significant financial shortfall in their voucher program. Significant is $400 million in deficit. So you can see that we don't have enough money in the federal program for the vouchers. And so what I would like to ask of this commission and to all of us here is that we need to advocate for housing programs. I always say that the vouchers are a long-term solution. They're not your short-term solution. However, if you abide by the rules and you can maintain your family obligations, it can be a long-term solution for you. It can be, there isn't an expiration date. So we all need to take our request for housing improvements to the legislative level. Each year, housing authorities reach their what we call leasing limitations. Some years we hit those early. We're really close right now to hitting that limitation. So I'm urging you all to reach out to your congresspeople, to your senators, voice your concerns about the needs for housing vouchers and more federal funding in these programs. Right now, it's obvious that we just don't have enough. That's all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a comment.
Okay.
So the National League of Cities, so that's city officials across the country, has meetings a couple times a year. One is in DC and then one is somewhere in the fall, in November. And they sent 2 questions, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the wording was, but one of the questions was if opioid crisis, homelessness, it was one of the, either the top issue in your community or one of the top 5 issues in your community or wasn't an issue in your community. And then the other one was there enough funding for that?
Yeah.
And those were the only 2 questions that they asked of municipal officials across the country. Those were the 2 questions. They didn't ask about transportation. They didn't ask about developing your airport. They didn't ask, those were the questions that they asked, was if there was enough funding for dealing with the opioid crisis and homelessness, and then how much that had an impact in your community. And I would say that we have an issue in our community, as communities do across the country, and that there is, as you're saying, not enough funding. And so when you're talking about funding and you're talking about sort of, there just isn't going to be enough, there isn't going to be enough because it's not being allocated. It's not like magic. So,
So I think
they
that's
feel
what we
like
need.
bad magic, but
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
because it's not being allocated. It's not that there isn't a need, and it always surprises me when there's obvious need and there's a program and a system, and then it just runs out on some random date, and then you have people who need help, and you have people who are in a program designed to help, and then there's no money to make the program work. So
It's a horrible position to be in. It
Yes.
really is. If I could elaborate a
Yes.
little bit. So I mentioned that I was part of I got to preview a tri-state housing study. It's not been released yet, but I did get to preview it. And I love that kind of stuff, so I was all excited about the details. But after I read it, I became extremely overwhelmed, because West Virginia, the overarching thing of West Virginia was just opioid crisis. And it's funny because tonight I told Emily, I was like, I need to meet with you. We need to get the state's opioid money. So there was a lot of talk at that meeting about how housing can be an important component. And I can't remember the state's program. I want to say it's the First Foundation. Ryan, would you know? With
The West
opioid-
Virginia First Foundation.
First Foundation, okay. So they're putting together an RFP, and I think that that's something that we need to look into. I mentioned
be
at the
ready
time.
to fill it out. I mean,
Yeah.
the application will come out, and we need to be ready to fill it out.
We need to be
I mean,
ready.
It's
Yeah, and I think that we need to advocate for the creation of housing. And so at this meeting, I actually followed the writer of the study, and I was like, help me come up with the right words. We need the right words to create housing. And she was like, we can do this. So I'm very optimistic that I think there's, millions and millions. I've heard in the long term it will be $billions of dollars to go to this, to this cause. But we need to tie it to housing, and how housing is this the base level of stability. So I've got some ideas, and I think that we just kind of need to get charged up about it and just, take it on full force.
May I ask a question?
You said 400 out of 800 will have a shortfall.
Shortfall.
Are we one of the 400?
We are on what's called a shortfall watch list. So we're close to being over. So we're in a. That's why we created this pool, so we won't go over. Or if we do go over, it's a little bit more manageable. So yeah, but it's unprecedented that there's this many housing authorities that are looking at shortfall.
What are the leasing limitations you were referring to?
So HUD, under our contract, we have a number of, it's called UMLs, unit months that we can lease. So every month is counted as a unit month. And then we also have a bucket of dollars. And so when those two things are out, that's our contract. So when we use that amount of money, our leasing limitations are over, and they're usually frozen until the next year. Last year we hit that early, like March. It was an awful feeling to be a director and know that you don't have vouchers to give out for the rest of the year, and it's March.
Are you all tied to the July fiscal year, or are you January?
We're January.
Okay.
Yeah. It's,
Close.
I mean, it is and it isn't. It's still, we still got 4 full months, and the coldest months are yet to come. So it's a scary thing. And you know, to your point, this program works. It's long term. It works. Put the money in the program that works. So I'm hopeful that we can kind of rally and take it up to the next level.
Just a quick question. You mentioned, I think, you said that 60% of your funds go to Mon County?
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you help me clarify that? Does that mean that 60% of your funds are spent in Mon County for Mon County residents, or in housing opportunities in Mon County, but not necessarily for Mon residents?
So
You know what I'm
they're
trying to say?
for rental units that are located in Monongalia County.
Okay.
So they, not just necessarily
It can
the
be
city,
for-
anywhere in the county.
But-
But of
but-
our whole tranche of vouchers, we kind of, every month, we kind of look at how many of
Right.
them are in which counties. And this month, we're usually 53%.
Is that because we have more housing opportunities?
I would say
here?
that's a large part of it, but, you know, considering that we're a regional housing authority, that's a big number for one
Yeah,
county.
sure.
So what percentage of those are Mon County residents that are placed in Mon County housing?
Well, they would all be living in Mon County. So where they came from, I wouldn't know that, but they would, 100% of the 60% would be Mon County residents. And that means payments are made to property owners who own
Yeah.
property in Mon County. So another big number.
And then what's the outlook for rehab housing programs similar to what we had before that maybe we're never going to have again, but I can't help but ask?
Oh, Deputy Mayor, that's near and dear to my heart. So that's one of the things that I would really like to focus on when we get together and work on this affordable housing study. We did such great work under CDBG, and I could tell you stories that will make you cry about the work that we did to improve housing. But there was just a lot of roadblocks involved around the environmental aspects of the program. And so we really need to kind of take a hard look at how we can, you know, be creative and find another way to do rehab, especially in the city.
Yeah, because we got to see lots of before and afters, and it was very impressive.
Yeah. It was a great program.
May I just,
Yes.
well, first of all, compliment you. I think in terms of the way you administer and navigate the bureaucracy and manage to be as efficient as you can possibly be, you've demonstrated that. And
Thank you.
I'm pleased with that. I have to confess, though, that I'm encouraged by your statements about wanting to do something in terms of thinking in terms of the future and future housing and how we might approach that. And I don't expect that you have answers for it. We're struggling with that too. But that is our concern. And I don't mean to be dismissive of the federal government and the monies that they provide through HUD. But it always seems to be, you know, a very slow trickle to a very large need. So, to that end, you know, you start looking around for other ways, not necessarily sources, other ways. And I would be appreciative if you and your organization having a different perspective would bring those possibilities, those concerns to us. You mentioned cooperation, and I hope that we can offer that. But I do encourage that. Again, I'm thankful for what you can accomplish and do. I'd like you to certainly devote some attention to the other. But thank you.
Understood. Thank you. And I mentioned one thing that we supported this year was the applications to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh. And so they do have, they put out, I'm trying to remember, it was a significant amount of money this year for housing opportunities. And we had several applications in Morgantown. And we were able to provide some technical assistance and to provide letters of support for those applications. But I think that's the kind of thing that you're talking about, is looking outside of, that's not a federal program, it's a private program.
Exactly.
A lot of money. And it is to serve low-income families with housing. So it's another opportunity that we need to really take advantage of.
When that comes in your site, if you would just simply give us an awareness that
Absolutely.
we might support that activity.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, certainly, we're looking to perhaps, you know, two people trying to achieve the same goal.
Yeah, those announcements will be made the week before Christmas, and I'm very hopeful that some of our Morgantown applications will be funded.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything else?
Crystal, thank you for your work. A couple questions. You had mentioned the wait list, but I missed the number.
515.
515.
Yeah, and we have an extreme amount of folks that are in need of one bedroom, and we don't have an extreme one-bedroom population. So that's something that I think that we need to consider, is, you know, doing some, you know, that's one of my suggestions when we look at creating housing. You know, maybe we need to scale back a little bit, even for home ownership, and not tiny homes by any stretch, but smaller homes, more modest homes that are more affordable. And the same, you know, like I said, our one-bedroom wait list it's incredible. You would be really surprised, and we just don't see a lot of one-bedrooms.
Gotcha. And then you had also mentioned that if you have a voucher, it doesn't expire. Could you explain?
It does expire.
Could you explain that?
Yeah, sure. So we usually, the standard is you have like 60 days, and then it expires. You can get an extension, but you have to go through the process to request an extension. And when we were going through this mass orientation, we decided to give everybody the maximum amount. So right off the bat, they had 4 months, and we felt that was, you know, that's the maximum amount that they're allowed to have. So that gave them, you know, gives you adequate time to search, and then we connect you with the housing navigator, you know, with other services that have housing provided. So we were thinking that that would be a way to get more vouchers out there to folks, and they wouldn't expire. So, but they do have a shelf life. If they're not used in 120 days, they do expire, unless there's an extreme situation that they can get a waiver for. And that's, again, a regulatory.
What's the average length of time somebody might have a voucher?
So we do a study, we're doing the study, so we're tracing those things, but most folks it's 60 days. From 60 to 120, the likelihood that they find an apartment is not as good as that first 60 days. I'll have better numbers for you next year when we're tracing it for a full year, but that's what we're seeing right now. The first 60 days, folks are out there, they're you know, they're shopping hard, they're getting their vouchers filled, but we do give that extra time for them to keep looking.
You know, somebody finds a placement. An ideal scenario is they have a voucher for how long, and then they're able to switch that into.
They can have a voucher forever.
Okay.
If they have to abide by their family obligations, and their landlord has to keep the stock in an acceptable manner. You know, we do inspections on the units, and the repairs have to be completed and those type of things. But if we have families that have been on the program for decades.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what it can be a long-term solution.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, the rules are the rules. If you're not following the rules, you're not making your obligations, then you can lose the voucher.
Sure. Thank you.
So one last thing you said really caught my attention, and
Sure.
that was the Scholar House.
Yeah,
Is that being run through Fairmont State?
it is. Well, they're actually providing us with some property, so we'll do a land lease with them, and we'll work with a developer to put the structure on some property that is under a land lease.
Do other schools use like old dormitories that aren't in use to provide like types of apartment congregate living?
The studies that we've been following have all been development, so they, created the housing, but I would think that would be a wonderful idea, and having the nice structure about this is one of the biggest obstacles to single parents that are in college is daycare.
Right.
So having the daycare on campus right there with their housing is key to their success.
Because when you said, like, the first thing, I was a student of the Brook Towers, and we had like the community center in the middle.
Yeah.
So if you're a single parent, you live in a dorm with your kid, and then you got daycare right in the center
Yep.
of the floor.
We've actually been working on this project since 2018, and we had a focus group in Morgantown and a focus group in Fairmont, and it was kind of like wherever we can find the property first. And it just so happened, so we've been visiting folks in Kentucky and looking at their model and meeting with their developers and their team, and so we're off and running. So we're gonna start small, probably about 25 units, and our vision would be that we would take it to the next university city. And the next university city, so that West Virginia can, 96% success rate for graduation is higher than most universities have overall. So it's just, you can just see the cycle of poverty ending by giving them that leg up to
And as a
complete their
university
education.
trying to encourage people to come here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great-
And you don't have to go to the university. So if someone can live at the Fairmont State Scholar House, and they can be in a tech program for, to be an electrician. They can be in truck driving school, they can be in beauty school. They just have to be an educational program. So
It's fantastic.
I'm excited about it.
Somebody else on, yes.
Yeah, and so I know you had mentioned the partnership with the city with some of the properties we own and trying to create a housing stock out of that. As you know, Fairmont Morgantown Housing Authority owns about 35 acres within the city. How could we work with you to help, maybe fill a need? Maybe that's where a lot of, one-bedroom apartments or units could be located in the public housing, or however you want to look at that. Is that an opportunity to kind of utilize some of that property, especially some of the larger property, and create what is missing?
Yeah, I think that our vision there will be to create a master plan, which I feel it should involve all aspects. It should have a little bit of commercial, a little bit of rental, a little bit of home ownership. And it's property right now that has several deed restrictions that we will need to work through, but we've got to start somewhere. And I think a master plan is where we need to start. And just to be frank, we just don't have the money for those type of things. So I've talked to the Benetton Foundation. They're listening. And I'm hoping that we can come together with you all, and you'll be able to contribute since it's in your city, and we can get a master plan started and then kind of go from there. And then we'll have some charrettes, and we'll talk about what the needs are that are addressed in the plan that we'll be producing, and hopefully something good will come from it.
So the previous iteration of the 35 acres talked about a model similar to the Scholar House that you're talking about, and also talked about a model with a portion that might be senior housing, so that you would be mixing
Multi-generational.
yes,
Yeah.
multi-generational.
Multi-generational.
You'd be mixing students with families and other generations that possibly could be beneficial to each other for making a community.
Right.
And I've heard of some of these in other places also recently. So whatever barriers there are, we should work on them, because there's obviously need. So
Yeah, that's
it
why I
would be
think
good
we
to
need-
figure out where
yeah.
there was a fit.
Yeah, I think that's why we need a master plan to kind of talk about what the needs are there. Like I mentioned, there's several deed restrictions on the property, and a lot of it's related to elderly housing, senior housing, memory care type thing. So we will need to kind of get all that worked out. There was a lot of egress issues with that property because it comes out on 705. And so that was some of the challenges that we faced before. So we just really need to kind of start fresh, look, talk to the folks that we need to talk to about getting the deed restrictions lifted, and then come up with a master plan of what's going to work best based on the needs that we have. And I think the sky's the limit there.
And then what do the wraparound services look like? Because I hear a lot about people really needing those wraparound services when they're entering into housing, especially if they haven't been in housing recently, and there's a lot of details and trying to keep up their end of funding for the property and just making sure that they can function within the property. So what do the wraparound services look like, and how are they funded?
So Deputy Mayor, you're spot on, and it doesn't take a lot to learn to know that you have to have those services, but they range anywhere from medical services, so even as far as taking folks to appointments to get their medications, to psychological services, setting them up with the right kind of service providers that can help with their mental health. But the very basic is just how to live in an apartment, how to be a good neighbor, how to pay your bills, how to take your trash out when it needs to be taken out, how to abide by the lease, how to combat discrimination, just anything if you've never had that opportunity before, there's just a lot of things that you need to know. And so the case management services are very widespread. Like I said, we have one group that does, that gives Uber money for transportation and medical appointments, and we have folks that do anything related to helping the kids get to school and fill out applications for like the foster youth program. They can fill out applications for college or applications for jobs, so it's just anything related to case management. So it's a very, very broad brush.
Anybody have any other questions?
All right.
Thank you. Asked a lot of questions. So the next item, item B, we are not having a presentation this evening, and now we are on to item C, an ordinance authorizing the acquisition and construction of additions, betterments, and improvements to the sewerage portion of the existing public combined waterworks, sewerage, and stormwater system of the city of Morgantown, and the financing of the cost thereof, not otherwise provided through the issuance of the city of not more than 45 million in aggregate principal amount of combined utility systems revenue bonds, series 2024A, West Virginia SRF program, and not more than $5 million in aggregate principal amount of combined utility system revenue bonds, series 2024B, West Virginia SRF program forgivable, providing for the rights and remedies of and security for the registered owners of such bonds, authorizing execution and delivery of all documents relating to the issuance of such bonds, approving, ratifying, and confirming a bond purchase agreement relating to such bonds, authorizing the sale and providing for the terms and provisions of such bonds, and adopting other provisions relating thereto. I guess we can talk about C. I don't know if we wanted to talk about C and D together, or how is this best looked at?
So, I'm happy to give an overview, if that's okay.
Yes.
And then we
Do you
can
want an
kinda go from there.
overview of both of them, or an overview of one of them?
So one is a bond ordinance.
You
and
better
one is a
talk to
project
the,
ordinance.
you need to talk to the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, one is a bond ordinance and one is a project ordinance,
Okay.
and there's two different series of bonds, so I could give an overview
Yeah, why don't
of
you
any
give an
part of that you'd like?
Sure.
Okay, so Tom Amon with Steptoe and Johnson, and we're obviously bond counsel to the city for this prospective project. So this is an upgrade project to the Cheat wastewater treatment plant. It's an expansion project, and also the replacement of the Whites Run pump station. So we have a Schedule B, what's called a Schedule B for that project, and that is essentially the budget. And so within that budget, hopefully you all can hear me, but within that budget, we have an estimate. Obviously, it hasn't gone out to bid yet. They have advertised for bids, so these are cost estimates at this point. But a construction cost estimate of approximately $28 million, and then we've got contingency of 10% with respect to that, and various other what you would call soft costs as far as design and land acquisition and closing costs and what have you, to get to a total estimated cost of approximately $39 million. You've got different funding sources for that. You have a sort of what I would call sort of a generational opportunity with the grant funding through the federal stimulus programs that have ended up with the West Virginia Water Development Authority for their economic enhancement grants. And they're giving away, they're granting hundreds of millions of dollars this year for water and sewer projects. And this project has been fortunate enough to get a very significant contribution from that source in the amount of $6,750,000. You have also a MUB, Morgantown Utility Board, contribution to the project, and that is mostly through for land and rights-of-way acquisition, and also equipment and labor of $2.2 million. You have then the remaining two funding sources are Clean Water SRF. So those are state funding agency programs through the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. They operate this, the WDA administers this SRF program on behalf of the DEP. So they've got two different funding sources in the project for that. A proposed $30.1 million loan for 30 years at 2%, and then a debt forgiveness loan, which is essentially a grant, because I believe there's a green element associated with the project that qualifies for that funding, in the amount of $500,000. So that is the proposed project. Again, a Cheat wastewater treatment plant expansion project, and then the replacement of that Whites Run pump station. And that is the cost estimate and the budget for that. They, the utility board has recently advertised the project for bid, and will be opening bids around September 24. And then obviously when bids are open, you can see what the actual costs are relative to the budget and also the committed funding sources, and see whether additional funding is needed or where we are with respect to that. There are a lot of projects due to that EEG funding that I mentioned from the Water Development Authority. There are a lot of projects being bid. So through August, September, October, I believe there's around 50 projects opening bid around the state, water and sewer projects. So there's going to be demand for contractors to cover all those projects. So hopefully, depending on what type of project it is and the location of it, you know, hopefully you guys are favorably positioned in that way to get a good bid for the project. But as far as process, obviously there's a need for a project ordinance in addition to the bond ordinance. So if you have a utility improvement project that's not in the ordinary course of business or the utility, and there is a project-related rate increase associated with that project, then that invokes the need for the project ordinance. So that's why we have that. And that ordinance describes the project and also describes what the prospective rates could be to pay for the costs of the debt service on the bonds associated with the project. There would be a public hearing associated with that project ordinance, and that's a 2-meeting process. So if council were inclined to advance that to the agenda, that would be covered at your 2 meetings in September with a public hearing associated with that. Then you've got the bond ordinance, which you're familiar with on other utility projects and other projects that we've done. That authorizes both the bonds for the 2 SRF programs, Series A and Series B. That Series A, I think we said, was not to exceed $45 million. But again, the actual budgeted amount is about $30 million. And then on the debt forgiveness portion, budgeted amount about $500,000. We have $5 million in there. If bids do come in above budget at the end of September, then the MUB will be talking to funding agencies. Could be, we don't know whether that would come by way of grant or loan or what the mix would be. So that's why building in plenty of cushion for any of the funding sources to cover a potential bid overrun. And then on the bond ordinance, it would be read 3 times, your 2 meetings in September, and then a public hearing, and then final enactment in October. And then when bids open at the end of September, you'll then be in a position, obviously, to evaluate cost and funding. But if they're also determine what the actual borrowing amount would be, so then you can determine what the actual rate increase that's necessary and associated with the project. So then if everyone wants to move forward at that point, then the rate ordinance would then follow in October with the actual rate increase that's associated with the project. And that is a rate increase that's just associated with that service territory that is served by that wastewater treatment plant. And that's a separate section of your rate tariff that you have rates associated with that service area. So that would just be adjusting those particular rates. So that's kind of a high-level overview. We've got obviously several representatives from the utility board here and their council. So we'd be happy to try to answer, have any discussion that you all would like to have with respect to that at this point.
I think probably the only thing the public would want to know is, why is this necessary?
So I would let the utility address that.
Maybe you could weave in why it's necessary and then like what the project might look like, or what's the solution? Why do we need it, and then what's the solution?
Sure. Rich Rogers with Morgantown Utility Board. Trying to going towards why it's needed. Back in 2017, I think it was before my time, we started to exceed our permit limits, both with influent flows and also influent chemistry. So our permit has a limit on, or not. It's based on the design of the current facility. That's what our permit limits were based on, and so we started to exceed the amount of flow into the facility, and also BOD, which is biochemical oxygen demand, something that they regulate. We started to exceed that as well on the influence side, and as part of that, the DEP was concerned about that, and we did a plan of action that they required of us, which we said in there that we would proceed with an upgrade to the facility to remedy those things. And so that kind of started the ball way back then. We've gone through the preliminary engineering report and into final design now, and so we are where we are with the upgrade to the facility. So that's really the why. I think there's some other things too. I mean, there's an odor issue that's out there that we will remedy with this project. Not really the catalyst for the upgrade, but something that we'll take on with the project. And I guess how that's going to be done is so we do have property that's adjacent to the existing facility that we'll use for the upgrade. And the upgrade basically at the plant site itself is we have 2 oxidation ditches, which is the method that we use in that treatment plant. And so we're adding a ditch, which will increase our capacity from what's designed now, which is 750,000 gallons a day, 0.75 million, and the new capacity design would be 1.75. So a little bit more than double the capacity. And so that would remedy today's issue, plus I think the Strand engineers who designed it, tried to plan for the future as well. And based on population growth trends, which is between 3% and 4%, designed the capacity to meet those demands, for the next 20 years. And as Tom mentioned, it also includes a couple of lift stations that are tied into the plant, White's Run lift station and Greystone lift station. And the White's Run one is old, 2001, and a lot of the parts and pieces in that are that old. And so they've met or exceeded their useful life and what they're designed for. So, replacement of pumps and lining through there and generator, things like that at both lift stations would be included as part of the project. We're also moving to UV disinfection at the Cheat Lake plant, which we do at the Star City plant. Cheat Lake was strictly chlorine. We chlorinated and then dechlorinated, and we're moving to UV disinfection out there, which has been very successful at the Star City plant, so we're excited about that. That's and a lot of pieces and parts. There's a new pre-treatment building, a new final clarifier that's going in, and all the lines and pumping that's necessary to get it from one piece of the plant to the other.
I'm sorry, I use a lot of terms that I'm not familiar with. So when you're talking about flow, you're referring to the quantity of houses that are utilizing your plant?
No, quantity of flow into the plant, so sewage flow into the plant.
Okay. And so
and we measure that through a meter that enters the.
So you're saying the facility you have currently can't keep up with it? Like it's not designed for the amount of people in the area?
Yes, at times it exceeds what it was designed for, and that's what the DEP came down on us for, was you're not allowed to exceed those permit limits. And so when you do, you got to come up with a corrective plan of action to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so that's kind of what started this process.
All right.
But yes.
So ensuring that our water stays safe.
Yes.
Because we're not exceeding.
And because of those increased flows, the BOD and the TSS, which is total suspended solids, those things will also be elevated because your flow is elevated. And so we've exceeded our permit limits with those 2 components as well.
So theoretically, as our population continues to grow, we'll be well covered because of this.
Correct.
The other question that I had was the one that I'm sure I'll get asked a lot, and that is who would be affected by a rate increase?
So it would be only Cheat Lake customers.
Okay.
So customers that utilize the Cheat Lake wastewater treatment plant. And so it's obviously just on the sewer side of their bills. So there wouldn't be an increase to the water rate. We're just talking the sewer rate for Cheat Lake customers only.
I think that's important for them to know. And what would the percentage look like? Do you have any ballpark?
I think it was, you guys might have to help me on on the exact number.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot
Tag
with,
team.
with those
That's okay.
numbers.
Mike McNulty, General Manager of the Morgantown Utility Board. Right now, our estimate is 91% increase, but we have notified our customers that not to exceed 100%.
And that's
So we've
only
built some
sewage.
cushion there in case bids come in higher than the engineer's opinion of cost.
And I guess the follow-up to some of the questions too, Rich, Mike, is what happens if we don't build this?
It will get built.
Worst case, say it.
Worst case is if bids come in too high now and it exceeds and our time limits fail and we wouldn't get the EEG grant, we'll go back to the drawing board because DEP will expect this project to be done. So it will happen. The worst case would be a consent order would come out of Charleston saying you shall move forward with this or face, significant fines.
With a 91% increase to sewage, what would that look like for someone's bill?
Yes.
Average customer?
Right now, a customer is paying about $35.59 for 3,400 gallons, which is the average that is used by the West Virginia Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council. And you would be looking at about $67.97, so about $68 with the increase.
68 would be the total.
Yeah. That would be your average monthly bill.
What does that look like compared to the rest of the state?
Right now, there are about 38 utilities across the state that have higher rates. West Virginia American Water, their rate is about $83.65.
So we're still able to provide below the average rate across the state with
Yes,
premium service.
we're still providing a very competitive rate. And I think it's important also to keep in mind that there has not been a rate increase in Cheat Lake for 10 years.
So how does that compare to the average rate, like a similar rate, say in the city of Morgantown or some of your other systems?
Yeah, so at Morgantown, the city of Morgantown is a separate entity all of its own. And right now, that is, I think, about $35.29 per month. But we do bill for 2 months. So you wouldn't see, we bill every 2 months here in town.
Cheat Lake is monthly.
It's monthly, yes.
So what would the equivalent monthly rate be?
$35.29, I believe.
So similar to what the Cheat Lake system was paying before all of these improvements that will go into
Right.
20 years into the future.
Right. So it's a large capital project.
Yes, it's a huge capital project.
Question, just
Yes.
a question. I'm assuming that 90-some percent increase, that's, the majority of that's going to be allocated to retire the bonds?
Yes,
And the-
overwhelming
And
majority.
the original amount, or $35, whatever it was, it will continue to pay for the treatment of wastewater?
Yes.
The reason I'm saying that is it fair to say that after the end of the bond, after the bonds are paid off, is that rate going to be adjusted back down somewhere? Or is that continue? I think that's an important consideration.
I think, Mr. Hawes, it really is going to depend on what the growth looks like. Right now, we're anticipating this construction would carry us for about 20 years. And so what is the Cheat Lake area going to look like in 20 years? What's going to come on in between once the capacity becomes available? Because it is a growth area.
Well, I'm assuming that, let's say, how long is the term of the bond?
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
So within 30 years, that base rate's going to have to fluctuate up to accommodate the costs, the increases in cost for treating,
Yes.
for treatment. So that's going to go up, and I would assume that that increment to pay off the bonds is going to remain the same. So
I would assume that everything's going to go up. You're not going to adjust the increment to necessary for the bonds, I assume, right?
Well-
What you're going to do is keep that constant and adjust the base rate, which is going to pay for the cost.
There is a
Operation.
few O&M items in the going level and in pro forma both, but the overwhelming majority is all debt service and to pay off the bond over the next 30 years. So again, it's hard to know what the future will look like because it is a growth area. It's one of the few especially for housing. In the county, so we may see more growth. I mean, what we're seeing right now, housing developments and proposed housing developments, we're already seeing some large numbers.
91% is worst case.
We're thinking 100% would be worst case, but we do have the opinion of cost, and that's what we're hoping that the bids will come in. It's an environment that's so competitive right now. We spoke to the director of the Infrastructure Council a few weeks ago, and he told us about 25% of the projects right now are coming in within engineers' estimates. But there's all this abundance of the grant funds that Mr. Amon was speaking of, and we've all got them. It's like back in when President Obama was in office and those funds were available, it was the same scenario. You have a lot of money going out on the street, a lot of competitive projects, and just few contractors. Especially when it comes to building a treatment plant, it's even less contractors to do that kind of work.
And then maybe if you would speak to the timeline of the $6.7 million grant and what needs to happen on the timeline that Tom sort of started to outline to be able to take advantage of that.
So what we need to see happen is that when we have the rate ordinance, that it would be read at the first meeting in October. And that would allow us to get rates into effect and sign contracts by December. In December, that is your drop dead date to have your project under contract.
In order to take advantage of the money that's available.
Right. That is the urgency that
That's the bottom line. Thank you. It's well presented.
Thank you.
And so you don't know the amount yet because you're waiting on bids
Right.
that will only be available right before that.
Right. We open on the 24th, which is the Committee of the Whole.
Of September.
Of September, yes.
We had to give a 30-day, period in there for contractors to review it and put their bids
Respond.
together. And so that's what kind of dictated that 24th.
For such a large project, 30 days is even a short window of time to review. Thank you.
This is a good day to ask questions because it's nice and quiet in here. And we have so many people available to answer, so appreciate you answering thoroughly. And
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so we've only read C.
Is that, did they also discuss?
Deputy Mayor, since they did present both items,
Pardon?
and since they did present both items, and you have a discussion item later to move these to an agenda, it might be helpful to just move on past both of those presentations.
Should I read the?
I don't. We'll read those as discussion items and ask council to move those to
Okay.
the next regular agenda by
Perfect.
assent.
All right. So we just discussed, just for the record, we just discussed D, and that we will read that in total in the next section. Now we are looking at a public portion. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak during our public portion?
Pardon me?
Annie Cronin, you're up.
There's no you in Yorick. Annie Cronin, Yorick, Human Rights Commission. I have both issues and concerns, but I will just share the concerns with you.
Well, here you are.
The first one is about the wards and boundaries that are being proposed for the redistricting. In a simpleton view, the requirement is that they count the number of registered voters and the amount of population in each given ward and redistrict to make that look even. And with just those parameters, I put on my statistician hat. It hurt. I remember why I became a history major. It doesn't look like it's entirely even up. The boundaries have changed greatly, which isn't my main concern. My concern is that when you compare it to the CBGB map, city development block grant maps, the number of minorities are concentrated in particular areas, and the number of people with the least amount of money are also concentrated in particular areas. And there are 3 wards that come out with very few minorities and more money. Well, that's the same thing. The 3 with the least minorities would be 2, 3, and 5, and 2, 5, and 6 have the greatest number of changes to it. It doesn't make sense to me right now, but it will later. The way that the statute is, and just considering the number of registered voters and the number of people who live in the area, it was done correctly. But just because we have registered voters doesn't mean they're active voters. So you could end up having only 5 active voters in your ward and a whole bunch of people, same numbers everybody else has. So I would suggest that the ordinance be changed to consider active voters versus registered, and also to consider wealth and diversity, equity, and inclusion considerations when redistricting. That's something that hurt my eyes to see. The poverty rate of all people in West Virginia, 17.9%, plus or minus 0.9. Poverty, all people in Morgantown City, West Virginia, 34.4%, plus or minus 4.1. According to the CBGB map, sorry, the hormones keep getting in my head, that doesn't appear to include students because the university is not in the low-income area. It's not where the poor people live. They would be more outreaching, and the 4th ward is getting a whole bunch more than they expected, and the 1st ward is getting more than previously had. And so just as a matter of equity, I would ask that the council consider changing that ordinance to make it more even and fair. And I don't know how students are counted in this, or if they're counted. There's some who are registered to vote here, and some are registered to vote in their hometown in another state. And if we're just counting the number of people versus the number of registered voters, that's going to come up uneven. If we're just in terms of where these students live, mostly. So, questions? What am I talking about? Just that the words and boundaries look unfair to me. So, my next issue is there's a gentleman who's come to the several meetings, I'm going to talk more than 4 minutes here, discussing the problems with Bluegrass Village. It is inside the city limits. Yes, there are some big problems there. Today, after a couple of months of trying, I finally got a copy of an old lease, one that's pre-existing, and a copy of the new lease. And what they have in the new lease is unconscionable, probably unenforceable. The city should take a look at it. The old lease has people, they're homeowners. They own their manufactured housing, and they park it on a lot at Bluegrass Village, and they pay to lease the land. The new rules say that you have to not have any overnight visitors unless you're registered as residents of your home. And you can't have more than 1 dog. and you can't have a cat and a dog, that sort of thing. It's micromanaging homeowners in ways that they should not be allowed to do. It also grants them permission to enter the premises whenever they want. The rate changes on the leases have gone up 3 times since the ownership changed in January. It is exceptionally difficult to find out who owns the place. I've had several people working on that. Secretary of State's office, can't tell you. You put in Bluegrass Village, doesn't exist. You put in the head corporation, it's got the webpage that is awesome, shiny, and happy. And these are nice communities. They don't exist on the Secretary of State registration page either. So there are shell corps involved. I just haven't figured out what they are yet. There are people who are being kicked out of their homes. They're homeowners, but they're being kicked out. And
So,
this is within the city. We can't allow this. There is some state code, but since I just got the leases today, I wasn't sure what we're working with. I just want to make sure that the council is aware that this truly is a problem. They've taken all of the annual leases and they're telling people you must sign the new lease because if you don't, out you go, even though it's your house and you own it.
so
In addition to
maybe-
that, they've changed it to month at will leasing.
Maybe you could send us some more.
Write
We're past
a
our-
report or something?
We're past our time.
Yeah.
Do you all want to hear another minute or 2 more? So
I just have one question. I'm good.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't usually ask questions like this.
Well, the other people were asked questions. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I will work on this.
We would be glad to talk to you afterwards.
I will work on this further, but I do want to make sure that the council is aware that this
Thank you.
property within the city limits is causing problems. And people are going to be homeless because of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Not to put any pressure on the other person in the room that might be eligible.
I know. I'm like, there's not very many other people here. Good evening. I just wanted to, I don't have any questions or concerns really. I just wanted to introduce myself because I'll be a face around for the next, around till May. I'm with WVU Student Government Association and I'm the new local governance liaison. My name's Mimi Ferguson. It's nice to meet all of you guys. So I just wanted to formally introduce myself. So in case you guys are wondering who the girl in the back of your meeting scribbling notes is, my main job is just to come to these meetings and figure out and listen and hear things that might intrigue the student body at WVU and report in our weekly student government meetings, and then kind of form a bridge of communication between the city and student government and the student body. So just wanted to introduce myself. Thank you guys.
And just so you know, you're welcome to come and speak at the podium for any of these sessions, and we would love to know more about what student government's working on.
Okay.
And you're also welcome to ask to be, you have to ask a little bit ahead of time, like a couple weeks ahead of time, but if you have something that you would like to make us aware of and you need more time than the 4 minutes allotted here, you can ask to be an agenda item and we'd be glad to entertain that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you guys. I don't have anything really today. We've been working a lot on public safety and it's an election year, so just election drives, getting people registered to vote. It's the main thing we're focusing on right now, just a little update. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Items for discussion. So we have item A and item B, and they're related, and we're going to read them one at a time, and then ask if you all would, well, ask if you all have any other discussion, and then potentially move them to the to our meeting agenda. Item A, an ordinance authorizing the acquisition and construction of additions, betterments, and improvements to the sewage portion of the existing public combined waterworks, sewage, and stormwater system in the city of Morgantown, and financing of the cost thereof, not otherwise provided through the issuance by the city of not more than $45 million in aggregate principal amount of combined utility system revenue bonds, Series 2024A, West Virginia SRF program, and not more than $5 million in aggregate principal amount of combined utility system revenue bonds, Series 2024B, West Virginia SRF program forgivable, providing for the rights and remedies of and security for the registered owners of such bonds, authorizing execution and delivery of all documents relating to the issuance of said bonds, approving, ratifying, and confirming a bond purchase agreement relating to such bonds, authorizing the sale and providing for the terms and provisions of such bonds, and adopting other provisions relating thereto. So is there any other questions? We've already kind of covered this, but if somebody has anything else.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Would you read that whole thing again? I'm just
An
kidding.
ordinance authorizing, I will take you up on that. So if you would like it reread, we can reread it. Sir?
Move to the agenda.
All right, let's move it to the agenda. And then we have item B, an ordinance authorizing the acquisition, equipping, and construction of certain additions, betterments, and improvements to the existing Cheat Lake sewage treatment plant and collection system, and recognizing the sewage rates and charges necessary to repay revenue bonds to be issued by the city to finance a portion of the cost of said improvements. So this was also discussed earlier, but if anybody has any questions, this is your moment.
Good.
Otherwise, we can move it to the agenda.
Move to the agenda would be my suggestion.
Agreed.
All right. Then we have the matter of adjournment.
I've never done that. I don't know if I can.
You can move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We got a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we're adjourning.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Quick.